Okay, so here we are, back. So this one will be a little bit shorter because I'm going to try and speed things up. I don't want to make you guys watch videos all day. So just kind of coming back to this, now we have to come up with a mission statement. It's going to help us to focus our employees, or focus those people working under us, or even just focus ourselves onto whatever it is our goal is. And that's what our mission statement does. It helps us to define a goal. And so if you look on page 144, you'll see an example of this. And he's talking about, my mission is to live with integrity and to make a difference in other people's lives. In this case, we're going to say that our mission statement So my mission statement is to live with trustworthiness and to cultivate the same in my employees. Because the thing about Covey is that he's talking about the individual that is yet to kind of be at the level of the leadership. He's kind of cultivating the person to go from dependence, which is dependent on other people in order to kind of function and get through life, to being an independent person. So, now if that applies to you, by all means, go through and read the book and apply it to yourself. But because this is a leadership class, I'm going to try and apply it to what it looks like in the leadership, the psychology of leadership. So, thinking about this now, we're not just talking about impacting the lives of other people, we're specifying this to our employees, right? Because that's what we want to do. We want to cultivate those people to have whatever character, to whatever principle that maybe we need them to have, right? So in our case, I'm going to put trustworthiness as my own, but then also try and cultivate that same skill, that same principle in the lives of my employees, or in the lives of my employees. So that's what we have here. But now, how do we do that? As for ourselves, we have to go back and look at that quadrant idea. And so, if you look, I have to sneeze. Oof. Okay, so this mission statement gives us a focal point. We are trying to be trustworthy, right? How do we do that? What does that look like? We need to center our life around that. Okay, sure. What does that mean? Well, start looking at the quadrant. Look at where you spend a majority of your time. By the quadrant, I'm talking about in habit 3. So if you're not quite that far in reading, I suggest going through and reading that, or at least listening to this and then maybe going back and reiterating what I'm talking about. So you have a quadrant. How many erase this? Okay, so up here, let's see, how does this quadrant look? Oh, urgent, not urgent. Importance on top, right? Yeah. Okay, and so he asked, where do you feel like you spend the majority of your time? And so there's things like important and urgent. He gives an example. He gives an example of all of these on page, what is this, 160? This would be crisis. This is essentially a whole class in itself, where you have the people who are constantly in crisis, who are constantly living in chaos, because they don't have the capacity to kind of get out of that level. Think about it like this. Go back to Maslow's from last week, right? Okay, so if you're in that crisis and that constant chaos, or whatever it might be, you're not able to move through the rungs, right? And so if you're underwater, you fall into a pool, and you can't breathe, you're not going to be able to think about how you're going to write your essay next week, right? First thing you're thinking of right now is how to get out of the water. If you're worried about being safe, and maybe you don't have a home, or you don't have money to pay for food, or things like that, that's going to cause you to be stuck in that realm, right? To be stuck in this rung, because you're not worried about what you're going to do with your retirement, because you are worried about your next meal, right? And so that's kind of what we're talking about here, is if you're urgent and important, you're constantly living in crisis, right? You're constantly living in chaos. You have to be able to get outside of that in order to function in these other three quadrants. Well, you don't really want to function in the other three all the time either, but Covey suggests you want to function here. I feel like that makes a negative symbol, but anyways, that's where you're supposed to be. And so this is good because he talks about he even talks about the concept of PC, and that's that production and production capability, right? He talks about the what was it, a goose or a duck? Anyways, whatever it was, I think it was a goose that laid a golden egg. The production was there, right? But the production capability left whenever the guy killed the goose trying to get all the gold out. So, anyways, go back and read that story. The idea is that you spend a lot of your time here so that you can prevent those crises from coming up, but then you can also work on your production capability. That way you can keep that production coming, and you're not falling into the crisis mode. You're not calling urgent and not important. Let's see. I mean, everybody. This is where like a lot of people fall into. I feel like, at least around here. um, Interruptions. I think you could qualify maybe phone calls as this, or maybe things that just don't necessarily have a whole lot of importance in your prevention or your production capability, but they're urgent nonetheless. And so, like a phone call, you can't really just like ignore that. You kind of got to answer it and see what's going on. And a lot of times, it may not be important stuff. And then, secondly, not urgent, not important. This is essentially the pleasure stuff, right? And here, I don't know what he puts in there: trivia, busy work, some mail. The things that aren't urgent and aren't important, but you do them for downtime, which are good to have. I mean, you probably you should. I don't know if it's good to be here a little bit because this helps you to get that prevention somewhat because it's not important now, but it might become important, right? So there's those things that maybe not be important now, but in a couple of days from now, there's a deadline that might be coming due, and so you need to start thinking about it. But ultimately, that kind of comes up with prevention, right? So with that being said, I don't want to. Covey makes a very good argument that you need to stay here for a majority of your time, but I feel like he undersells the value of being in the other places as well. Because if you don't have any of this, you're not going to have that downtime. You're going to burn yourself out. So, anyways, how do you use this to achieve this? Well, the thing is that with Covey's ideas, staying in quadrant 2, where you're getting that important stuff done, but it's not really urgent and you're in that prevention, it keeps you developing that trustworthiness, right? Because if you're in the workplace and you're trying to get things done, you're getting them done early, you're working on things that matter, you're focusing on deadlines that are not, they're important, but they're not urgent, right? So you're getting ahead of the game. You're keeping up your production value or production capability. And so by doing that, you're achieving all of your goals as far as being trustworthy because you're thinking about the workload. And if, I mean, I guess I'm looking at it from a production perspective. I mean, trustworthiness is a lot of other things as well. And so if we look at, let's say, trustworthy in the workplace, what does that look like exactly? I guess that would be people trusting you. I mean, it could be a million different things, right? But let's say in this particular instance, we're talking about trustworthiness being let's say valued in a team. And what I mean by that, because how does that play into trustworthiness? Well, if you're not trusted by the rest of your team, then obviously there's going to be some problems. And so, if we look at what does that look like in the workplace of being trusted in a team, now, let's say that we have a deadline as a team. Produce 10 quality students in a day. Oh, went to screensaver again. Hope I didn't lose you guys. There we go. Okay. So produce 10 quality students in a day. Think of, substitute that for whatever it is that a team might be required to do in any given time. So think of that circle that I had earlier. If this is the English department down here, the manager or the department chair of the English department is going to have all the English teachers doing something. If you're a team leader and leadership came down and said, hey, we need to do, let's say we work in, I don't know anything, I've only worked in education. Let's say that we're Domino's, right? And I worked at Domino's when I was a kid. And so leadership comes down and says, hey, we got to have 10 pizzas over here. There's not really much team. Well, okay, so there is. And so the leadership says we need, so many pizzas produced. And the store owner comes in and says, okay, this is our job for today. It says this person's going to do the production of the pizza, this person's going to deliver the pizza, this one's going to quality control the pizza, whatever that means, and this person's going to do the transaction. So you have 4 jobs there. Trustworthiness here is going to keep, in this case, producing those quality pizzas. Each team member is going to have their own job, right? Without trustworthiness, if you can't trust the pizza guy to make his pizzas, then you can't. That hinders the quality control guy, that hinders the delivery guy, the transaction guy. All that stuff kind of gets jacked, right? And so, in order to keep things rolling, excuse me, I need some water. The crisis section we want to stay out of because that's going to cause problems. If one person is in crisis for a majority of the time, that's going to diminish their trustworthiness because ultimately they're going to be rushing to get their part done. And if they're not getting their part done in time, or maybe they fall behind, or if they're constantly rushing, then that's going to make trouble for the other people, right? It trickles down. So now we come over here to prevention, production, and production capability. If you have the person that's getting things done early, or the person that's getting those non-urgent things out of the way, but they're still important, they're getting done so they can move on to the next person, that creates that level of trustworthiness so that the other members of the group can do their part. Because obviously if one piece doesn't deliver, then the rest of the pieces can't either. And so I guess I'm just elaborating on this, probably needlessly, because I want to make sure you understand how does the mission statement tie in with a principle-centered person, and how does that stuff tie in with the quadrant work? What does this look like? And so as the leadership, your job, and this is kind of closing, the leadership, your job is to cultivate this type of thinking, quadrant 2 thinking, or quadrant 2 acting, I suppose. Cultivate that in your employees. Or if it's yourself, cultivate that in yourself so that you can become that valued member of the team, the trustworthiness, and whatnot. So anyways, that is summing up essentially mission statements, quadrants, what else do we have? Principles, and of course the paradigms and perceptions, everything we had earlier. Anyways, if you have questions, let me know.